This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA.
Welcome, everybody. You are tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Hot and heavy NBA action is taking place already, and we're roundabout to the first quarter of the season just ending out. And as we had stated in our previous episode, man, it's really surprising the teams that we had pegged, to be probably among one of the worst teams in the NBA, or a team that's, this is their struggle year or possibly their rebuild year. They're saying nah to that, and they want to be in those conversations to say we can run with the big dogs. Now, how long that's going to last, not certain, but it does lend a greater conversation to put certain things in context about what we're kind of seeing as the trend that's leading us to believe that some of these teams have sustainability with the way that they're structured, with the way that they play, the style of play, and really the overall effort. All that means is that it's must-watch TV on the NBA scope. And to break it all down, I got to roll out the red carpet to my right-hand man, www.shawsports.net, Big Kahuna PNC. My man, Mr. Shaw, repping out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. What's good, man? I mean, you leave, you go down to the warmer weather, you don't bring the cold with you. Why are you leaving us with the cold up here, bro?
Because that's your region. You know what you signed up for. You know what it is. I got the rain though. I could definitely still have some rain here in our mid to late November time here. So as we're closing out hurricane season,
rain and sleet are not the same thing. Okay.
Oh, I agree. I don't disagree. I'll take this, but at the end of the day, like I said, we're still fresh off of another tropical storm, hurricane. Just a week ago, roaming around the areas in the Atlantic. So yeah, I mean, I don't know who's safer, who's enjoying their time a little bit more, but again, definitely, it's all good here in South Florida.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was having a conversation with someone just the other day about how, it's crazy the way that the temperature and climate, has changed. And I think we really have to take into consideration that all of the things that we used to kind of define, what seasons may look like and feel like, that may all change, soon enough, man. Like, how we used to be taught, like hurricane season, I think was like from like June, or not like, yeah, like May, April, May, all the way to November. And then here, we're knee deep in November, almost into December. And there's still that possibility that you have weather systems that are creating tornadoes and hurricanes down in, the southern region of the United States. I find that amazing, right? Like, just the other day, I find out that there's like almost 6 feet of snow up north. I mean, so much so that one of the football games, I think it's the Bills, and I forget who they're playing, they had to move the game from Buffalo to Detroit. So I mean, these are the lives of our times, man. These are the days and times that we're living in, bro.
1000%. You know what I mean? So for our friends listeners, you get a little meteorology report here as well too. Climate change is real. Don't believe otherwise. And we're here trying to keep it pushing.
Bring them umbrellas out when you go down to see the heat. That's all I'm telling you.
Yes, sir.
Anyway, man, we got a great show on tap, man. We're gonna basically focus our attention on some of the other things that we've seen taking place in the association. So all eyes on us, right? Like, what are we seeing out there right now? Trending, and it's something that could be short term, but it could be something that might actually leave a lingering effect for us to pay attention to as the season moves forward. So Sean and I will kind of look into that, our observations of what's going on in the association. As always, you know how to get at my man Shaw. Get at my man Shaw at Shaw Sports NBA, or get at me at Game Face Lead. The show's Twitter handle at NBA Baseline, available on all the major platforms, so you know where to locate us. Just look for the Baseline, put us in, and then once we come up, just add us on. So whatever major platform you use, allow us to be your listening pleasure for everything happening in the association. You also know that we roll with the 19 Media Group. So anytime you want to listen to us and the litany of talent that we roll with as far as with the 19 Media family, be sure to go to www.19mediagroup.com. And if you want to catch this episode and all our previous episodes, you don't typically utilize your podcast listening platform, you can simply go to www.thebaselinenba.com, and you can be able to take us in all of our previous episodes. Trust me, we're good for the ears. Anyway, before we get started, right, you know how we do, you know how we roll. We're going to go into the crux of what's happening in the association. But obviously, we got to pay some bills. So you'll catch us here on the flip side when we do our breakdown.
Time to break it down to the bone gristle.
Time now for the breakdown. Callie Warren Shaw, the Baseline NBA podcast. And our topic for the breakdown is things that we are seeing, observations that we have witnessed so far in the early outset of this NBA season. And, you know, Shaw, like year in and year out, we often focus much of the attention to things that tend to happen singularly, probably because of a player, probably because of something that becomes a headline, becomes fodder for the social media space. But I think these are the things that we're trying to highlight and we're trying to bring up and pay attention to, is because I think these are the type of things that can help dictate, a different storyline that may manifest itself. It may present a different algorithm of how we are defining this NBA season, the calculations that are made about, what the league may do moving forward, especially as we get a little bit closer to that time frame where we talk CBA and what the demands may meet. A lot of this is predicated not just on the business of the game, but also what the players and the teams are ultimately doing to continue to grow the game. So it's just interesting, Shaw, that this is a good time for us to kind of peek into the window of what we see into the NBA, maybe whip out the crystal ball a little bit. Maybe there's a little something futuristic, nostalgia for us to look into, or at the present moment right now, embrace what is.
Yeah, when we do our shows annually, we're going in 10 years deep right now. I mean, about a decade in this joint in a couple months. We typically do a show where we kind of like, hey, what surprised us? We kind of look at what stats are out there. And I kind of wanted to roll all of that into this one conversation here, because I think this has been a very unique season in the first 15, 16 games, depending on, how many games each team has played to date. A month or so in, last week we reevaluated some of our early season predictions, but now it's time to really just kind of focus on the what is and really try to get some better understanding of that. And I think this would be a good time to kind of like really dive into a variety of topics. Obviously, a lot of times we focus singularly, as you alluded to, maybe on a player or a team, but give us an opportunity to just have a broad stroke of what's going on in the league. And there's a lot that's happening. So a lot to cover in this next hour here.
Yeah, totally. So let's kind of focus our attention with the mounting injuries. Now, it's interesting, Shaw, because, we did an episode where we covered guys that we were, heavily anticipating to see get back on the basketball court because we missed them so much throughout the course of last season. Don't know whether or not it would have, dictated, the outcome of the Warriors hoisting that championship. But I do think that certain star players being missed at certain points of the season really became the tipping point of how we looked at that team, of whether or not they're playoff worthy, whether or not that, they're still in contention to make a run for the title, or whether or not teams have just conceded to the idea that we're just going to have to look forward to next year and really determine what kind of talent is surrounding some of our star players. And I don't even just mean star players, even your superstar players. So the beginning of this season, it's been kind of weird, Shaw, because we haven't really talked too much about how injuries have plagued some of the teams. We can actually lend ourselves to the idea that injuries in some way, shape, or form have impacted a couple of games here and there, but it's only until recently, maybe within the last week or so, that we're now starting to see the injuries kind of mount up and have an impact on how teams have to resituate themselves to maintain competitiveness at the early outset of the season. So guys like Morant, Cade Cunningham, Tyrese Maxey, Mike Conley, Damian Lillard, LaMelo Ball, all of these guys now suffering specific injuries, coming back from injuries, or immediately getting themselves re-injured and going back out. What is that speaking to within reference to what we've seen last year, off-season, preparation, guys coming back, load management, and now reinserting themselves back into what we're seeing from this year? Does it surprise you that we're starting to see the injuries mount maybe a little bit later than more so we've often seen, where it's early at the outset? Most of these guys wind up missing weeks at a time, and we start sitting here looking at these teams a little bit differently because of it.
The biggest thing I'm going to say about the injuries is I feel like there's been an unusual amount of early optimism, only to find out that it's worse than they originally thought. Injuries are a part of the game, that we understand. But I think I've been a little bit surprised at that, what I just said. It's like, oh, yeah, well, it looks like it's this. And then, oh, shit, it's more than that. Like in the case of Cade Cunningham right now. So, hey, it's supposed to be like, we'll be evaluated in a week. Guys are going to be out indefinitely, may need to have shin surgery, which sounds awful. So, you know what I mean? It's just they're not able to get the proper diagnosis here, I think, initially for whatever reason. And I'm not faulting modern medicine or team doctors and like that too. I just think it's been an interesting situation with a couple of guys here, even going back to Dylan Gallinari to begin the year with the Boston Celtics. And it's like, all right. And then now, no, he's going to be out the entire year now. So we're waiting on results here as we record on what's going to happen with Mike Conley. You would hate to see that Utah story kind of get blown up by virtue of injury. They actually may be buyers now in the trade market, if you're believing some rumors out there, but that was before the Conley injury anyway. I think the John Morant thing, week to week, as they just get Jaren Jackson back now is going to be interesting, but Jackson is going to load manage because Memphis really does have high hopes of going far in the Western Conference. So all of what you said, all of it kind of mixes up into this, NBA gumbo, if you will. And I don't know how well it tastes, but it's definitely something that we're being forced to swallow, unfortunately, with some of these injuries. Like again, Lillard now, getting another calf strain as well. Don't know how long he'll be out. So just tough to see some of these guys, especially with the great stories that have been out there in Utah and Portland specifically, to see have key guys go down for them.
All right, so this leads me into the question that I wanted to throw out there, because we're talking about guys like John Morant and Damian Lillard, very viable entities, right? Teams, viable star players with teams that have obviously exceeded expectations in the early outset, right? Because they're right in the thick of things. And you know what? We can even throw Mike Conley in there, albeit I think his role as it pertains to the depth of what the Utah Jazz has, I don't know if it necessarily truly is a detriment, right?
Well, he's averaging a career high in assists this year.
No, that's what I'm saying. But the fact that they are deep, right? Yeah. I think can lend itself that they can stave. And look, you can even kind of throw this, and I think we were talking about this before we actually started, recording, is Tyrese Maxey, right? The impact of him not being out on the floor for the Philadelphia 76ers, because I think much could be made of the fact that Tyrese Maxey was something like of a lightning rod, but now there's these expectations that the Sixers can only go where Tyrese Maxey takes them, essentially, right? So I lean to you on you kind of giving me insight a little bit from your perspective, Shaw, of these guys that I'm mentioning, the people we're talking about, and the circumstances of, do you continue to let this guy rest as much as possible if you find out that the condition is far worse? Or do you let these guys kind of determine how long it's going to be before they try to bring themselves back into the fold, simply because of the level of urgency and with the way these teams are designed of how they're competing in the early outset of the season?
I mean, it's a cop-out, but it really is case by case, and depending on the team depth that you have and what your overall and short-term and long-term goals are going to be. I think in the case of Detroit, there's no reason to rush Cade back. You're not going anywhere. So let Jaden Ivey come out there and rock and cook, do what you need to do. You even have Alec Burks out there if you really need to suck up some minutes. I think it's fine. You let Cade just get himself right. Philadelphia is in a different situation because Harden is already out. So now Tyrese going out as well too puts all that much more pressure on Joel Embiid. Tobias Harris is battling injuries. I mean, I don't think he's going to be out for an extended time, but he's missed some games, I think, with the hip thing going on. So I think Philadelphia, because of what Doc Rivers is trying to accomplish, they may be like, hey, how soon can you get back, Tyrese? Hey, how soon can you get back, James? As opposed to other teams who may not have, like Detroit, as I'm alluding to. The Utah situation, I think, is interesting, as you just mentioned, but they do have Sexton. They have Talen Horton-Tucker playing backup point guard, and quite frankly, they're getting away with it. So, who am I to judge? And I don't think they'll do anything drastic, and they'll let Conley, who does have a history of injury, kind of make sure he heals as well too. The Lillard thing is where I think I'm most intrigued, because Portland is off to a surprising start. I don't really feel like they have a legitimate backup point guard. Simons is really more of a scoring threat. Justice Winslow is handling the ball some, I think, for them, in a pinch. And I just don't. I think Portland came in here with expectations that I didn't see for them. So as a result, there's that level of, hey, well, we wanted to we wanted to snap back, be back in the playoff hunt. And here they are, second, third in the Western Conference off to a great start. But Lillard's already been out, and, he missed most of last year as well, too. So that's a situation where they know they have to play it safe. But at the same time, I think there's a little bit of pressure because they don't want to slip in the West because they already missed the playoffs last year. And I think they have some really high hopes over there in Portland.
So a couple of things, and you brought some really cool salient points out to kind of maybe quash my perception about how severe this is. I completely agree with you with Cade Cunningham. And I think, again, a lot of this is predicated on what Casey wants to see when you realize that you don't have your star player out there on the floor and how he's going to get the young guys to step up. And look, we were talking about this, about guys that we should be looking for, from the draft class. This is Jaden Ivey's opportunity. This is an opportunity for him to really kind of.
Killian Hayes too. I forgot to mention him. He's played well in the absence of Cade.
Exactly. And again, remember how you were talking me off the ledge about, I'm saying that, we have to be careful about what the perception is if guys like Hayes or maybe like Ivy go off, that they would, Cade Cunningham has proven to me that he exhibits those qualities, that he is a proven leader to this team. And it's not just the numbers, right? Like his ability to lead, I think, and the versatility that he brings to the table, I think is something that just cannot be overlooked. And if anything else, now I think it really just come down to Casey being that coach that people have lauded him for when he was coaching up a very young Toronto Raptors team to position themselves to be playoff hungry. He's got to figure out a way to get these young guys to start playing as if they recognize that they should be good enough with or without Cade Cunningham on the floor, albeit we already know that that's not the case typically, but that's the opportunity to do so. As it pertains to Tyrese Maxey, and I find this to be an interesting point, and I don't want us to belabor this because we got other things we want to look at. But Tyrese Maxey is an interesting situation because you see Doc Rivers using DeAnthony Melton and Shake Milton. Right? As a combo guard situation, and everything is going through Joel Embiid. So now I bring this question back to the court because you're the person who still believes that Joel Embiid should be the MVP. This is the dichotomy of what I think Sixers fans have to struggle with. Is it that we are believing that Tyrese Maxey, when he comes back, has to amp up or play within, still knowing that this goes through Joel Embiid? Everything that we're talking about, the 76ers and their aspirations to finally get to the NBA Finals, still has to go through Joel Embiid doing MVP-like type numbers? Or does it have to be balanced out by saying Embiid can't do it without a Maxey? He can't do it without a Robin to what he's trying to do?
I'm going to sound a little waffly on this. I think I've come to the realization.
Waffly? You've been more of a pancake man. I've never seen you.
I don't even know where to go.
I've never seen you waffle. You know what I'm saying?
It's tough because without those guys, Embiid puts up MVP type numbers. I don't know if it leads to long-term success because he will ultimately wear down having that high of a usage rate and having to carry the load on both ends of the basketball court. So he needs at least one of those guys, Maxey or Harden, to return, I think, to be able to share some of the offensive load and some even the play creation too that he's now saddled with, at the high post and at the elbows at times. So for me, he needs those guys, but I think if one or both of them are there, they take a significant blow to his MVP case. It doesn't mean the offense and the team doesn't still run through him. He still has to be the focal point, but I don't know statistically that he can get there MVP wise with those two guys on the team, but he needs both of them to have the ultimate team success. So that's where I say I'm waffling on the MVP side of it, because I think as I dissect what's going on in Philadelphia a little bit more and have that level of understanding, it's like, yeah, those are the facts. Like Tyrese Maxey isn't trying to stunt his own shine, I think, at this stage either. And they need him. They need him to be out there and be an 18 to 21 point per game guy. Like they need that from him. I mean, especially as Harden is, Harden's injured now, but Harden is still on the latter side of his career. And whether we're not getting the Tobias Harris from the Clipper days or whatever you felt the best iteration of Tobias Harris was. So that's where I land with the Maxey situation and how it means to Philadelphia's overall success. They need him to be there and be a positive scoring influence so that Embiid can take some plays off, maybe offensively, and then give that maximum effort defensively.
I just find it interesting because then when we talk about a guy like John Morant, if you have Jaren Jackson Jr. coming back, you really have a respectable two-headed monster, so to speak, where you've got so many good players. I think the Desmond Bane injuries to me spoke more loudly about where the Memphis Grizzlies have to resituate themselves and how Jenkins is going to have to utilize the team. You know, you've got quality players, but they don't play at a quality level unless you've got Morant, Bane, and Jaren Jackson Jr. So if you get back one of those guys, you got to be careful not to overuse them. Whereas I think to your point here, when we're talking about Tyrese Maxey, Shaw, it's still, the jury's still out about whether or not Maxey elevates the necessity of Embiid's performances and how he plays to continue to elevate him in that MVP conversation, or does it still continue to be that solo act? And the only thing that you're going to hope and pray for is that he doesn't burn out or doesn't flame out when we get towards the end of the year. You're tuned to the Baseline. Cal Lee Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA as we are getting right into our subject of the breakdown, observation of what we've been seeing in the association. Shaw, I'm going to let you roll out. What is one thing that you have typically seen so far the early outside of this season that has caught your eye?
Scoring, bro. Scoring is way up.
Yep.
And I'm not used.
Throw this in there before you go into your thing.
Go ahead.
In the immortal words of the Mandalorian, he would ask, "Is this the way?" the Ole defense, my friend, is in full effect.
It's tough. It's crazy, it's tough. And usually, I think in the beginning of the season, they always say it's like, oh, the offense takes some time to catch up because the defense is the one thing that, isn't as precision for the most part, like, shooting and scoring and those types of things. Like, it takes a different level of focus where defense, you can kind of lock in and almost kind of will it to happen by brute force to some degree. But to see at this stage right now, I think we have seven 30-point per game guys currently, at this stage of the season is pretty absurd. It's not like it's 2-3 games in, again, we're 15, 16 games in and there's 7 guys averaging 30 a game. Typically 2-3 at the most. So to me, there's something going on here, and especially when you take a team like, well, whatever. Well, I don't want to always bring up the Celtics. You take a team like the Celtics that was number 1 in defense last year, and they were a top 10 or top 12, I think, team offensively, and now they're number 1 offensively, and now they've crawled back to middle of the pack, 16, 17 defensively. Like, they've really almost kind of done, a complete 180, which is interesting to see that. And they're getting great shots, and the three balls are flying and going in. I didn't expect Donovan Mitchell to go over to Cleveland and do what he's doing, especially with Garland, what they expected to get from Mobley, and even Karis LeVert to some degree being in the starting lineup. So that to me is something that
real quick, Sean, do you think with the way Donovan Mitchell is playing and what the Cleveland Cavaliers are doing, I mean, there's going to have to be a bigger sample size, but do you think that Donovan Mitchell can catapult himself into the MVP conversation?
I think he, and again, first week he was in that conversation, but I mean, you don't win the MVP in the first week. I think they've come back down to earth a little bit as they've also battled some people in and out of the lineup as well too. But I think if Cleveland ends up with a top 4 or maybe even 3 seed in the Eastern Conference, it's very possible that Donovan Mitchell can be an MVP candidate despite the help that he has. Because if he's going to rip off 30 points a game, 31.2 right now as we record, that's chaos. You know what I mean? That's chaos. I think the surprise guy in this is SGA in OKC, and obviously we've been talking about him a little bit. We had a chance to go see the Thunder, when I was up there visiting y'all, and he's a certified hooper, man. So him in the 30-point game, 30-point range. Donovan Mitchell, KD, not too surprising. Tatum averaging 30 for the first time in his career thus far. Doncic at 34 a game right now, and Embiid at 32, Curry at 32. It's real chunky out there on these offensive streets.
Yeah, totally. So there's so many things to kind of unpack and unlayer. We're not going to be able to cover this all in a show, but I want to highlight a couple of things that I do find interesting about where, how I am, Shaw. I am one who believes more in defense. It's just me. I'm a D up guy. You know what I'm saying? D block. That's me. You know what I'm saying? Rough Rider forever. Okay. So, but my thing is that I can live with offense being the numerator, right, in this equation, if it's opening up the opportunity for more players to get some shine, right? Like, I don't know if I can buy into the idea that it has to be the same 6 or 7 people that we're talking about as being the that's dictating the way that offense is being, played and scored for most teams, unless we're actually acknowledging that there are other guys who are helping to influence the uptick in the scoring, right? So if we're watching games where we're seeing guys like Jalen Brunson averaging like 22, something like that, when we're saying to ourselves, like, him coming from Dallas, is he going to be that guy that's going to be able to have more opportunities to shoot because they really need more of a point guard presence? And the Knicks are figuring out a way for him to find his opportunities to score and be aggressive and things of that nature, and they're being successful with it. I'm good with that, because I think when you have some players, they may eventually find their way on how to be better defensively. It's interesting because I feel like that was what I thought needed to happen when the Warriors, when they were under Mark Jackson, they did not know how to properly play defense. They learned how to properly play defense, and then Steve Kerr came in and opened them up offensively, right? And the problem is that too many times over, we ask guys to commit to certain things that they are not good at, transitioning to, and because of it, part of their game wastes away. Part of the opportunities of how good they really are waste away. There's so many guys right now that we could probably look at and say, damn, whatever happened to them. But if they were playing right now in this current climate of the NBA, they probably would have this sudden resurgence of being legit players who can be playing in the NBA right now. You know what I'm saying? With the way that the offense is moving. So I guess in a way, I'm leaning a little bit more on the idea that I appreciate that the scoring is up if it's going to be competitive. Now, if the scoring is going to be up and it's just nothing but blowouts, it really makes me question, were these guys ever good defensively to begin with? You know what I'm saying? Was the idea to ever play defense even mattered? People want to blame it on the rules. I just think it comes down to whether or not the players want to play defense. You know what I'm saying?
Well, let me interject this one thing. And, as I was kind of surveying this topic before the show, at some point, you figure there's going to be some type of defensive breakthrough that comes in again. Like some coach is going to come up with a scheme, like when Tibbs was icing everything, icing pick and roll all the time. And then that was the wave, and that kind of limited some scoring. Somebody is going to develop a scheme, in essence, that will probably, slow this down a little bit. And it's just one of those things. It's cycles, it's ebbs and flows, where offense catches up and the defense figures out a way to catch up, and then they take the lead, and so forth and so forth. But we're definitely in an offensive boom right now, at least especially early part of this season. But it'd be interesting to see if we find a coach or some assistant coach somewhere is like, you know what, maybe we should do this now on high screen and roll, which every single NBA team is running, to kind of combat that, and try to get the balls out of get the ball out of the best player's hands, moving forward too. So yeah, somebody's gonna come up with something.
One thing I will say too, Shaw, is look for where the analytics are really going to start reading into how teams are defending the three ball, right? And I'm not just talking about your ancillary, statistics, like, team that defends the 3 percentage. And what I'm talking about is based on the way that a defender actually harasses a player. So you ever notice now when guys are shooting the three, it's not even the first or the second. It's like the third attempt around them being kind of a pest to disrupting the shot, not even necessarily to contest the shot. And I just wonder where we're going to get to that point where analytics is even going to even break that down to say, are those measures are good enough to qualify us in deeming that person in the defensive player of the year category? You know what I'm saying? Like, we look at the regular things as blocks, steals, defensive rebounding, defensive rating. But I really do think that there are going to be even deeper numbers, that if we see that the trend and the uptick is there are more players out there who are shooting the three at a higher rate, making the three at a higher rate, what are we doing to defend that and it be something that is a tangible statistic that we use other than those regular, stats that we tend to lean towards?
Yeah. No, there's stuff out there. I mean, again, you have to have, a scout's level of access, Second Spectrum and, those types of platforms out there. But, you'll find that some players are doing more shot contesting, at the rim, more shot contesting at the 3-point line, mid-range, et cetera, et cetera. And I think it will be about how defenses, funnel shots to guys who they don't want shooting the 3-ball. And that's why spacing is so important. And that's why everybody needs shooters out there. So I think it's a nuanced conversation that could take us down a definite rabbit hole, so to speak. But long story short, offense is up, defense needs to catch up, and we'll see where the rest of this regular season takes us.
All right. Coming up, Shaw and I are going to dig in a little bit, man. No name fame. Some dudes out there, man, they're not getting that. They weren't getting that love before, but trust me, this season, they're making their mark. We'll tell you some of those guys are. We'll also get into some weird vibes that's happening out of the shot. Shaw's been, he's been getting that tingling sensation that ain't been right about Chicago. So he's going to speak on that. Is Giannis getting heat, right? Like, say hi to the bad guy, maybe? I mean, this guy was like the most respected. Now he might be actually one of the most hated. What's up with that? Are the Warriors feeling salty? Got a lot to talk about, man, with our observations going on in the association. So you don't want to miss out. So catch us here on The Baseline.
This awesome show that you are listening to is sponsored by Rich Kid Money Bear Clothing. The Bronx-based company represents 1990s streetwear with a modern twist. Rich Kid offers high-end quality clothing at reasonable prices. They have t-shirts, hoodies, sweatsuits, and more for men, women, and kids like me. You can check them out at richkidmoneybear.com, and you can use the code 19media for a 15% discount. Okay, back to the show. And as always, this is a 19 Media Group presentation.
All right, we're back. Lee Warren Shaw, Baseline NBA Podcast, in our breakdown conversation, observations, things that we're seeing in the association. So as we move the conversation forward, Shaw, I don't want to see you tossing and turning at night, man, when you're not feeling it with what's going on out there in Chicago, right? They're bottom feeding right now in the Eastern Conference. But you're sensing something of a weirder vibe. It's something that's outside of what the wins and losses are dictating. What's up with that?
Yeah, the short version of this for me is, I think Zach LaVine gets benched the other night, in a closely contested game. And, Zach LaVine has had issues with previous coaches and now seems to have a little bit of umbrage here with Coach Billy Donovan. Zach is not off to a great start, came into the season a little bit injured, and he's been looking to try to find his way. They still don't have Lonzo Ball to really kind of help control the offense and get everybody involved. And 6-10 as we record, bottom third, both offensively, defensively as we record right now. DeRozan, while we never expected him to be the same guy that he was last year, because he was at a top 5 MVP candidate level last year. There's been games where he's taken 5 shots, 6 shots. Like, I don't understand. Like I said, it's just strange. It's just weird stuff, I think, for what I'm seeing in Chicago right now. And while I really respect Billy Donovan as a head coach, I don't know what he needs to do to kind of fix the mix. While I expected them to regress from last year, I just don't like what I've seen, how much of a regression and how they're losing some games. And now this LaVine stuff just is giving me a little bit of pause. And I don't know that this is the happiest of marriages like it was last year when DeRozan came in and kind of got him off to, a surprising start. Caruso has been awful offensively, and not to say that he's supposed to be lighting it up, but he's been really bad. So I just want to see Chicago play at a better level, and hopefully they can get some chemistry together. If Lonzo's able to return in January or whenever that is, maybe that helps. But right now, I don't know. It just smells a little frowsy to me, bro.
So just as we were talking about, scoring is up, and how if I can appreciate that a team is scoring and they're doing it in a way that the team becomes better because of it, great. But this right here, Shaw, is a perfect example of a team that let's acknowledge the fact that part of what made them good last year was the fact that they played good defense. They played better defensively. They can hang their hat on that. And they had an MVP caliber type season from DeMar DeRozan for a good portion of that season, right? And it kind of masqueraded the disappearance of Ball. It masqueraded the disappearance of LaVine. Now all of that love and that hype in the offseason, I can't wait to come back, let's run this back and everything like that, I think is now really exposed the deficiencies of us really respecting what they're valuing. Now, I don't know if you put that on the coach or you put this on the players and what the prioritization should be. I can tell you this much. If there's no belief that Alex Caruso is a legit point guard for your team, if you don't have anybody that is going to command that respect to get guys where they need to be, and you're not going to have guys that can hang their hat on what makes this team in totality as good as we thought that they were last year, then yeah, this season is going to go to ish, right? It's going to go all bad for this team, because unfortunately they don't have the luxury of playing against bad teams in their same division the same way, or even in their conference the same way. Everybody in some way, shape, or form has gotten slightly, or if not incrementally, better. And so now it really exposes how really good this Chicago Bulls team may or may not have been after what they gave you last season.
Yeah, and the Sumo has played well, right? Or well-ish, I think, in spurts. You look at DeRozan, he's still averaging 25 a game, but he's had like 2 or 3, 40-plus point games where that kind of boosted his average. There's games he scored 8, 9, whatever it is, and again, taking under 10 shots, which is just absurd for someone of his caliber. I don't know.
The bench, I think, has struggled as well. Like, I'm sure the bench has played better to save them, but not, in a way where there's complementary, feelings to what's happening here. Like, it's just, they're not in sync at all. Like, in any aspect of the way that they're it's either work to save them or save, themselves to get, from being outworked. It is the extreme is just so crazy when we're talking about this Bulls team.
Yeah, and Vooch has got to do a little bit more, I think, offensively. He can try harder defensively, if nothing else. Patrick Williams, I don't think, has been what they've expected. When you talk about the bench, Goran Dragic's probably been one of their better bench players, which is probably an indictment of some sort in 2022. Kobe White, more or less out of the rotation, battling injuries again as well. So I don't know, man. Like I said, I want to kick them while they're down, so to speak. I feel like they can be better than what they've shown. While again, I expected the regression, I just didn't think it was going to look as bad as it has thus far. 6-10, not the end of the world. But if they're going to make a run at these playoffs, they're going to have to start to get guys back, get feeling good, kind of back offensively specifically. And as you alluded to and continue to allude to, tighten up some things defensively. They can't be, in that lower third. You need to get at least to the middle of the pack somewhere, along with that offense as well too.
Absolutely. All right. So is it just me, Shaw, or do you get the feeling that the Warriors have been kind of acting or conducting themselves a little salty? Is it, am I just being out of, everybody's focusing on their struggling. I get that. Yeah, this team is struggling. No question. Haven't won on the road yet. Got that. Typically, there would be something within that team. There would be some level of emotion that would say we're really disgusted by what's happening. And it wouldn't be lip service, right? Typically, I would hear Klay Thompson say something out loud, because if he rested on the fact that he was playing solid defense against, whoever he was playing against, and the team just collectively didn't play good enough defense, he would call the whole team out and just be like, we're not playing good defense, and it frustrates me. We shouldn't be thinking that this is acceptable. This is not good. We really hear it so much even from Klay Thompson. But what I do see mostly with the Warriors is they have no problem jawing it up against the opposing team, especially if the opposing team is giving them the business. And typically, the Warriors have been the kind of team where they let their play do a lot of the talking, and then they wait until after they've waxed that ass to go back and say, talk to me when you are on our level. You know what I'm saying? And I don't know. To me, I just sense a little saltiness from the defending champions.
I can see what you're saying. I think, Klay and Draymond, maybe more specifically, as they both really struggled. Curry has been MVP level again, lights out, best start of his career. I think we mentioned that just even last week's show. I'm concerned, I think, in terms of how they're carrying themselves. Like, they're letting maybe some of the talk get to them, because to some degree, and this is going to sound backhanded, I understand that, but to some degree, the stuff that they're receiving in terms of about them being in the twilight is true. And as a result, they're trying to buck against that notion and show you, no, we're not done just yet. So it makes them a little bit more prickly on the court and in some in-game situations. But teams are antagonizing them, because they quote unquote think they smell blood. And I would just be careful. You know what I mean? Don't poke the Steph Curry bear. But if you're talking Ish to Clay into Draymond, that's not as wise as well. But again, I can understand where some teams are feeling coming from because, hey, like you said, they've been beating people's asses for the last X amount of years. And if you can see like a little bit of a chink in their armor, it's like you're going to attack that and let them know about it at the same time.
But you know who we've done that to as well, but has always kind of bounced back. But I will put the caveat in that, you know, he put it on the rest of those guys to say, I have no fear of taking it on the chin, but you guys have got to be willing to step in and do Chris Paul, right? And so what I look at with the Warriors as kind of a correlation to that is it's always been about how the Warriors play defensively. And I know, again, I harp on this, but have we not said that this has been the key to the Warriors and their dominance? It's not just what we know that they can do offensively. It's when they step up and they become collectively one of the better defensive teams in the NBA. And I think people get this twisted when I say that, in the sense that it's not about what the statistics will always tell you. It's about what they're forcing the other teams to not be able to do against them, right? Like the Warriors are notorious for turning the ball over. Do we not talk about that anymore with them? Because that's just what they do. They're risk takers. They make calculated decisions that defy the you know, what the status quo should determine and dictate. They actually frustrate those people who put together these defensive analytics. Because when you watch the Warriors play, you're not talking about what they just do through the course of the game. It's through certain specific situations, certain moments that makes you say, damn, that's a damn good basketball team that you don't want to be playing against when they've got their minds right, when they apply their defensive principles intact. And to me, they're not even able to rest themselves with confidence on the fact that they can lean on a team to play bad offensively against them defensively. Most of the teams that they're playing against feel more emboldened to go at them offensively. And because of the fact that we're not seeing them flip that switch to what they would typically do defensively, collectively as a team. And I feel like that's part of what spearheads that level of saltiness, is that they just can't just flip that switch and say, I'm gonna lock this dude down, or I'm gonna take that paint from them, or I'm gonna contest these 3-point shots. They, even at home, when I was watching the other night against the Knicks, they just look like a team that's kind of floating through this situation, feeling like they're going to be able to figure this out. And I think their body is telling them something different about how they have to change that approach for them to be able to flip that switch the way that they used to do in the past.
Well, yeah, there's a little bit of a championship malaise here. And again, I don't want to belabor it. We talked about the Warriors last week a little bit as well, too. But you're right. I think they do have some irritability right now. And it might be as a result of, like I said, their body not being able to just turn it on when they want to. But it's still very much early in the season. And I think if we're still having the same conversation, you know, February, March, and April, well, then, yeah, then there's something to really worry about.
All right, Shaw. Let's go ahead and focus our attention real quick on the no-name fate, right? I've been waiting to kind of get into this because you have a couple of people as well too that you're saying, we're like, yo, when were these cats gonna get some love, man? Like they doing some things. They're blowing up on social media. You know what I'm saying? Giving people, you know what I'm saying, gas face alert. You know what I'm saying? Like. We need to start showing these guys some love. So this is a no-name fame team right now that, you know, and I know you got some guys that you want to holler at and make some mentions, but guys like the Isaiah Hartensteins, the Kenyon Martin Juniors, right? Who look like, you know what I'm saying, he sat down and had a conversation with his pops before he decided to come into this NBA season. And now he just straight putting gonads on people's foreheads every time he elevates to the rim. Sam Hauser for the Boston Celtics, you know what I'm saying? Among one of the 3-point shooting percentage leaders in the NBA. Edmund Sumner, with all of the chaos that's been going on with the Brooklyn Nets, and we mentioned his name, he's not getting enough love for helping, you know, Jock Vaughn look like he knows what he's doing, coaching up some young dudes playing next to a guy like KD with the Brooklyn Nets, now kind of reasserting themselves back into the conversation of relevant teams in the Eastern Conference. Yo, man, like, let's start showing some of these guys some love.
Yeah, I love what you've done here with that, and I would even just kind of tap in on a couple. I like what Devin Vassell is doing out there in San Antonio. Been a little bit injured here as well too, and yes, I know a lottery pick or whatever the case may be, first round pick. But nice to see him actualizing some of his talent. Bol Bol has been traded like 4 times since coming into the league already,
and everywhere he goes, right?
And yeah, and for whatever reason, Orlando's injury situation has allowed him to kind of enter the starting lineup ahead of some other guys that I wouldn't have that to have been the case. He's averaging 2 blocks a game, top 5 in blocks per game. If you would have told me Bol Bol was going to average more blocks at this point in the season, even than say someone like Jared Allen, I'm like, there's not a chance. You know what I mean? But here we are. Aleksej Pokuševski and OKC, seeing another guy doing great things defensively, especially when it comes statistically on the block side. But really be giving SGA and Josh Giddey an effective outlet there on the wings and on the corners to shoot the 3 ball as well too. So it's nice to see guys who are not necessarily your household names making contributions, and despite whether they're first round picks, lottery picks, or whatever they are, some of them they've had a hard road. Yeah. And it's nice to see them having some success here in the early part of the season.
Gorgeous Yang out there in Philadelphia, man. I mean, this guy, he's getting key minutes now.
Say gorgeous. You called the man gorgeous. George Niang.
George, but isn't it supposed to be pronounced gorgeous?
If it is, that's the first I heard. I thought his name was George Niang. I thought going back to wrestling days, George.
Gorgeous George. Yeah, but I mean, I'm just saying because it's ES at the end. Maybe the E is maybe the S is silent. I don't know. But yeah, I mean that would be a great wrestling name. So he's got a career after his NBA career and stuff. But the guy, he gets to the free throw line. I think he's I don't want to jinx dude, but he's got like 18, 19, 20 consecutive free throws made so far. He's among one of the one of the top guys shooting the 3. But more importantly, he's an extra person that I think with confidence that you see Doc Rivers leaning on to help stave off those minutes for their, for your, coined MVP dude, Joel Embiid, so that he can sustain the kind of run of dominance that, we're hoping that he's able to achieve for this upcoming season. So, what is it? Aleksej Pokuševski. Yeah, dude is balling. I call him wiry, fiery. You know what I'm saying? Thin is in the NBA too, brother. You know what I'm saying? Like we're liking some of these guys at Bol Bol. You know what I'm saying? They look like they need to eat a few more waffles and pancakes. But that side of that, man, did they actually show that they can ball, And we would have been saying the same thing if Chet Holmgren was actually, playing this upcoming season as well, too, for the Oklahoma City Thunder. So I like the idea that, even though these guys may seem to be thin in stature, they're able to still play an accelerated level and show versatility. They're bodying up against big dudes in the paint at the same time as well, too. They're dribbling as if, they got Steph Curry blood in their veins and stuff. It's pretty awesome to watch.
Yeah, and I'll give one last shout out, I think, to Zubac out there in the Clipper land, averaging 11 boards a game right now. Just didn't expect that, from him coming into the year, and didn't know what his role would ultimately be. He's obviously been a guy who can play off the floor at times because of his lack of mobility, but really giving the Clippers a big boost, especially on the glass. And, somebody who's, again, just a consummate professional, and just, hey, sometimes he has really big games. You see him out there like 25 and 15 and stuff like that. You're like, yo, where did that come from? And then he kind of falls back to earth. But to be at 11 boards a game right now, I think is huge for him, career high, and shouts to him for what he's been able to do out there in Clipperland.
All right, Shaw. So finally, the last thing I think we wanted to kind of touch on and highlight when it comes to our observations of what's going on in the NBA. This is mine. Yeah, if you, by all means, lay out any more that you might find to be something that you'd noticed even after what we've discussed. But I'm beginning to notice, man, that our boy Giannis is getting some heat. I don't know what it is. I feel like Giannis is having to speak to more and more incidents that are occurring when he is either playing on opposing floors or, at the end of games due to certain situations and incidents that have been occurring. I think the latest one is with Montrezl Harrell. There was an incident that occurred with Joel Embiid. What's up with Giannis getting this heat? Now, let me put this caveat out here. I would expect that there will be a visceral reaction when you got a guy like Giannis who plays like he just doesn't care, right? My optimal terminology, he just doesn't give a what, right? But nothing has changed from that mentality of Giannis whether it was before he won his chip, before he's won his multiple MVP awards, and even after the fact, right? Like, this has been him. It's always full tilt go. But I'm noticing now that there is this vitriol, or no, not vitriol, but visceral reaction from players with regards to how Giannis is, acting or performing, or what he's doing there, whether it be on the court during games or off during, before warm-ups or during warm-ups or whatever the case may be. There's like an uptick of that. And I find that to be somewhat interesting. Is he more hated than what I thought typically about, or is that there no level of respect there for what Giannis is to the NBA?
There's a level of respect, but I think with that respect comes a little bit of hate from some others. He's in a situation where, he's climbed the mountaintop, multiple time MVP, won an NBA championship, and has been perceived as one of the better and just nicest human beings out there because of his story and the whole nine. So a media darling to some, but I remember, again, I think it was a couple years ago now, Christmas game against Boston or whatever, and he dunked over Marcus Smart like that. And he mouthed, "I hate that MFer," right? And there's things about being just in the competitive throes that you can really appreciate, but it's one of those things where it's like, all right, well, is he really this nice guy that he portrays himself to be? I think Steph gets a little bit of that as too. He gets like this media darling. Steph is an asshole. You know what I mean? And that's not a knock. I think you have to be an asshole to a certain degree to be
right.
successful. But It's like, who are you being an asshole to, right? And you never want it to be. And I think in this latest situation, it comes down to, all right, well, was he interfering with, regular 9-to-5 co-workers or workers, if you will, at the arena, interfering with their ability to do their job because he wanted to do his job and thought his job was more important to shoot free throws after the game. So it's a little bit of a catch-22, and as everything is, again, there's the black and the white of it. It's probably somewhere in the gray, of like what his personality really is. But I think, again, when you're at his level, you're going to receive a lot more criticism, especially from those who you play against on a regular basis, because it's like, you know what, this MFer isn't as cool and nice and sweet as everyone thinks he is. He's a dog, he's an a-hole. And I think, he's done a great job, and him personally and his team done a great job of kind of maybe masking some of that to some degree. But I don't necessarily know if it's a real issue or not.
Well, so part of the reason why I even brought this up is back when we were watching the NBA, right? Kevin Garnett, Carmelo Anthony, right? The times when like Tyronn Lue, Allen Iverson, right? Charles Barkley, you know what I'm saying? Michael Jordan. Like there was no masking. It was just what it was. And they can smile and kiss face and be all cool with each other when they're out there on the golf course and things of that nature. But on the basketball court, they literally was just like, F you, you know what I'm saying? You getting in the way of my glory. You know what I'm saying? And they made no bones about it. And maybe it took a couple of years after the fact before a lot of that kind of quelched down. And it's just interesting how players in this community and the way things are and CBA agreements are, we could put in all of these variables in there. But I think part of this is this expectation that we think these guys really need to be nice to each other. When all of it comes down to is, I thought you guys are competing to win. And I'm not saying this is like a gladiator ring and you got to go kill a person off as our man Jim Jones would say, off with his kufi. You know what I'm saying? Like we shouldn't be acting like in that kind of, but you should have a literal level of, yo, I don't like you right now because it's only me and my team. That's who I'm concerned about, who I'm worried with. Maybe some of these guys get this crossed up in the idea that you got to show me the same level of respect and love and things. I think when it comes off the court is when it gets bad. On the court, somehow they find themselves and say, like look what happened with Klay Thompson and with D Book earlier this year already, right? And just the way that they go back and forth with the banter. But then D Book comes back and says, oh, I got nothing but love and respect for Klay. He got a right to say what he got to say. You know what I'm saying? He got them chips. So some of these guys, they really do recognize and they understand that, but it's where it's just so weird because it just comes out of nowhere sometimes. Like, oh, I had no idea that these guys really, really do hate each other in that kind of way. You know what I'm saying? I love the whole thing with Luka and D Book, right? This has been going on now for like a year and a half. Had no idea that Luka really felt some kind of way about D-Book. So when the Mavs put it on the Suns in the playoffs, can you imagine now if the Suns and the Mavs replay each other again? I want to see how them smiley faces, because now you're playing for much bigger stakes. It's not just a regular season game, but if they carry it on in the regular season and then they carry it into the playoffs if they play each other, now you're going to be like, oh, it's on and popping. You know what I'm saying? None of that little foolery that goes on where you troll people like KD and other dudes do. No, I want to see it on the court. Like, you really legit don't like this player? There's your opportunity to shut him and his team up. I want to start seeing more of that, because I think that's what brings out a much healthier level of true competitiveness, rather than that fake stuff that we tend to say is, oh, I'm just going to mess with these dudes on Instagram, or I'm going to mess with them on Twitter. Like, enough with this, man. Like, you really legit don't feel this dude? Make sure it's known when you're playing on the basketball court, because that's when you're actually showing them that it translates to what you do out there in your profession.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can't remember. I just heard this phrase, and I think somebody had said it a while ago. I'm trying to get the cliche all mixed up, what I was like that. I said, but the best sign of respect is showing no respect. And I think that's on the court. That is right. Like, right. He's like, listen, I'm trying to win. And that's all that matters. But when it spills off the court, some beefs are everlasting. Like I always say, I love that quote from Nas. Like, some things really, some people are never going to mix, but some of it is fake and fabricated. Like, look at Russ and, Pat Bev right maybe they're not the best of friends, but whatever it is, they've gotten past it. Rondo, before he came to LA, had worn F LeBron shirt, or like the F LeBron shirt. You know what I mean? So it's all conjecture. And then the circumstances of
now Rondo and Chris Paul, that old. They ain't gonna be there's no he ain't going to invite him to any of them cookouts out there in North Carolina.
And that's all right. It really is. So I think they just got to find ways to make it appropriate on the court, for their team success first and foremost, fan enjoyment, I guess, secondarily, if you will, and then media fodder, not at all, but it's something that we'll definitely interject ourselves into. But the main thing is that they keep it basketball, and keep it professional at all times. And hopefully guys like Giannis and others out there, if their personas are real, then we'll see that, pre and post career.
But one thing that I will say though, Shaw, that I hope happen, like I hope doesn't, I don't want to say doesn't happen, but one thing that I'm hoping doesn't veer itself when this takes place is Giannis kind of backs off, right? Like, he has to explain himself every single. No, you don't need to explain yourself, right? You always said, I go hard, I go 100%. You ain't got to explain yourself. Just continue to keep doing what you do, and things will take care of itself. If you have to address every single time that there is, then you're basically saying that it does weigh on your mind, and that you're really trying to be the most liked, not the most respected. You know what I'm saying?
What is the thing that they say though, is like, we love to see somebody rise, but we also love to see them fall. And Giannis is at the peak of his career. So I'm not saying that he's falling in terms of his talent, but maybe there are some winning to want to say, you know what, let's make Giannis the bad guy now for the next year or two or whatever, and see how he handles that role, that villain role. Same thing like how LeBron was, and things like that as well too. So I don't know, like, I get the sense he's probably too nice to ever really, really do it. But I think if things continue to push, maybe we see a little bit more of that, in the coming weeks, and maybe even seasons to come.
Yeah, man. I let me put it like this, man. If Giannis has got to be the head of the table like Roman Reigns, I'm all for that, man. Do what you got to do, bro. You know what I'm saying? Ain't nobody feeling his oos, then he's just gonna have to let it loose. That's all I'm gonna say about that, man. You know what I'm saying? Shout outs to the bloodline. Shout outs to Roman Reigns. You know what I'm saying? And the rest of the Usos and Sami Zayn, man. They listen, they're riding a high as far as their FaceTime right now. Like, they are all over the media. everything now is with a high level of oopsie in it. So, you know what I'm saying? Keep doing what you do, Giannis. Keep doing what you do. Awesome show this week, Shaw. So much stuff, man. And I love the fact that where we're at, man, is only allowing us to be able to further probe into what we're expecting to see for this upcoming season as well, too, because I think it's going to open up some more dialect and more storylines as far as, how competitive and, and the fact that there is already teams within striking distance still You know, there's a boatload of those teams. Yeah, we know that there's other teams that are struggling or whatever, but the fact that everything is pretty tight knit, whether it be the Eastern Conference or the Western Conference, I like that. That bodes well. It means teams are going to be in the mix. It means that there's a lot of teams that are going to be in play, and we're going to have to start guessing just when we get around All-Star weekend and stuff, trade deadline time. We're going to be those buyers and sellers. I can't wait for us to get ready to do a show like that too.
Yeah, the season is delivering, you know, and we want to hope that it continues to do just that. Lots of drama, lots of intrigue, lots to talk about as always. You know, we'll see, you know, who's next on the docket right now. I'll throw this last one out here. I'm seeing the Sacramento Kings on the rise, man, above 500. Mike Brown and company got things going well. So it's really great to see some teams that maybe we didn't expect to really starting to do some stuff here. And, you know, we'll see if they're able to continue it. You know, that's been the main theme of the season thus far. Can you sustain this early season success? And those who've been struggled, will they turn it around? Either way, we're in for a great, great season the rest of the way.
Absolutely, man. And so, as always, we appreciate you guys for taking us in and listening to us over the next hour or so. For the Baseline, Cali, Warren Shaw, we appreciate you guys. You know we do.